Anytime that we're modifying saws, we always run into clearance problems. Clearance on between the cylinder, crankcase, clearance between the flywheel and the cylinder. We're lowering that cylinder down and you know, raise compression and change transfer timing and all that, or you know, port timing, all that kind of stuff. We run into other issues. Like this clamp normally is on the bottom, but we've lowered it down to a point to where there's no longer room down there for it. On these, I found I can stick it here and it'll work here. It'd be nice to shorten the screw up a little bit. I could bring it back up a little bit for the impulse line, but it does miss. But the next issue is that, let's see if you guys can see it. When I put the cylinder on here, it's pushing on the boot. It's going to be pretty tough for you to see that movement, but it's putting undue pressure on the bottom of the boot where the boot fits in here. So I'll be taking a little, you know, bit out of the bottom of this piece here. I'll take this whole floor out of there and I'll cut this down. I don't make it any wider, but I cut it down so that there's no pressure on the bottom of the boot, and I clearance that. That'll be the next thing that I got to do here. And then I can put the clips in the piston. I don't have them in there yet. They send me a plug and 4 clips. There's already 1 clip in the piston. I get a new bearing, right? And I forgot to order the correct decomp for this because it's different if it goes in the top of the cylinder, like this one's in the top, and the decomp for these are in the side. There we are. And I would trade the bearing, them 4 clips, and that decomp plug for the correct decomp today. It's going to take at least a week, maybe 2 weeks, for me to get a decomp plug, the correct decomp. And I know a lot of guys don't like them. They take them out, they leak, they this, they that. Tell you the truth, I don't have an issue with decomps. I never have. I don't know why everybody else has issues with them, other than the aftermarket ones are absolutely junk. So, but OEM decomps, sure, they leak just a tiny bit. Most spark plugs leak just a tiny bit. It's not the end of the world. It's not like a crank seal being out and sucking a whole lot of air. It's just minuscule, and it's not going to create an issue. So, and the guys that don't use them, they just get carboned over and they don't leak after that anyway. So, and a lot of my saws, compression's high enough that a decomp's nice. Saves on the rewind and stuff like that. So I'll get that floor out of there and get that clearanced, and then we'll be moving on. I was asked what's the difference between an XP and an XT. Basically, you know, an XT is a stratified charged motor, or straddle as we call them. That's this. Divided intake. We got the straddle ports in there. Got a much larger piston, taller, heavier, with the ports in it for the straddle. We got a large intake boot that has divided through it. We have a larger carburetor that has divided between the fresh air side and the, you know, air fuel ratio mixture side. This is a carburetor for an XP, the XP cylinder. We have a conventional intakes, not divided. We have a 4-port motor. It's got 2 transfers per side. It's called 4-port. Stratified is a 2-port motor with the added straddle port in it, but only 1 transfer port on each side. That's the basic difference. The top cover is a little different. Brake hand guard is a little different. But you know, this carburetor is a little smaller than this carburetor, and but in all reality of it is that, you know, this carburetor does better than this one in my book. And I put these carburetors on these motors and I didn't like how it ran. If you're doing that, you probably should put a 385 boot on it. I believe does fit, but it gets real confusing. You know, you might as well use a 385 carb if you're going to do that. I think that's a better carburetor to use than this one, the older Tillotson carb, HS carb. I don't know. I just can't figure out why I can't make this saw run better than what I can. This cylinder. I believe that you know, that the 2-port design's not the best, and it's kind of old school in technology. Why they put a 2-port in a Strato is beyond me, but I'm not the engineer, so all I can do is work with what I'm handed. But this, you know, this originally an XP, and then, you know, EPA forces us to do stupid things, and so then this stratified thing gets adapted to an old crankcase, basically. And that saves Husky a bunch of money because they don't have to re-engineer all of this, and passes for emissions for a while, right? And then of course they redesigned all of their saws in their 5 series, which is a better design in some ways, but it's not the design that I prefer. But that's preference. So them are the basic differences, you know. I mean, if you want to understand how a stratified engine runs, I did a video several years ago, I mean maybe 10 years ago, on exactly how a stratified system works. But it's pumping fresh air in one side, down the transfers. First thing that goes through, up the transfers then, and the stratified air goes down the transfers, and then everything comes back up to go into the combustion chamber. The first thing out of the transfers is fresh air, no fuel in it, and that's supposed to scavenge out the exhaust, and that's what gets leaked out. The exhaust is fresh air, and then the fresh air fuel charge is supposed to come in behind it. Basically, that's how that works. There's a little more technical to it, but that's the basics. So that's the difference. Not sure really what he wanted to know for sure, but that's my explanation on that. And we're gonna move on. We're gonna put this thing together mostly today. So moving on. I want to start putting this thing together. Cylinder's cleaned up. Everything's cleaned up. I'm gonna be needing a new tube of Durco here before long. To get by for a little while longer. Well, sometimes you slide a piston on there and pin falls right in, and the next time you gotta mess with it for a while. I guess I got plenty of these circlips, so if I let one zing away, I don't need to go look for it. And then ears on the clips, I either got to go straight up or straight down. Doesn't matter which. The ring's on, there's no top ring or bottom ring, but there is a top and bottom to the ring. I'm on the right way. Anytime I take a saw apart, even a brand new one off the shelf, I keep track of which ring was on top and which ring was on the bottom. That saw was run at the factory. That ring has already got, just a tad bit of somewhat of a break-in, Even though it only ran 5 minutes, it's done something. I like to put the rings back same way they came out. I don't like switching stuff up. This is just 2-cycle oil. Put a little on the bearings. I'd rather start a motor with too much oil in it than not enough. Never put an engine together dry. Ever, 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 never. Oil up the piston, oil up the rings, oil up the cylinder, oil up the bearings. Never, ever think about putting a motor together dry. If you want to kill one, that's the fastest way to do it. Do a base gasket delete. Most all of my saws. My theory on that is just leave a little bit more metal on the base of the cylinder for the bolts. A little bit stronger. It's only 20 thousandths, but it's 20 thousandths. I want no oil on the surfaces. I use Durco as a sealant. I've gotten along with this stuff very well for a long, long time. You don't need very much of it. You're not trying to fill a big gap like doing an oil pan or valve cover on a car engine, we're just trying to fill maybe a thousandth or two. If it's more than that, you probably done something wrong, and it'll come back and haunt you in other ways. Any saw that has a flange on it, I usually put it on the cylinder first. And it's easier to put it on the cylinder than it is to put it in the crankcase. Otherwise, on a non-flanged saw, I would be putting it on the crankcase at this point. The reason for that is I can do a ring compressor on this one The ring compressor will push on the flange, where one without a flange, it would be, my ring compressor would be in the Durco, and then the Durco wouldn't be there. So I put it on the base, crankcase base. Grab my ring compressor. Make sure it's clean, nothing on it. I think I stopped last time in the video with doing a clearance on the carburetor floor, airbox floor. That's all done back together. One thing I like to forget when I'm putting saws together is hook up the impulse line. I'm good at that. I don't run too well that way. But for whatever reason, I just seem to always forget that step. I still got to modify the carburetor and the muffler and ignition timing. Got impulse line up while I'm thinking of it. Flange on the boot. Air filter base is different. Put that in from the X-Torque. The XP air filter base is different. You need that grommet out of it, out of this one though. For the choke. Some things Husky does, I just don't understand. You know, this grommet could have come with it. I guess they get more money by selling individual parts, so That's in there. Ring goes in the boot. That in there. One thing a lot of people miss, they change carburetor, you know, they take it off and they chuck it and put the new one on there. The carburetor is drilled for a 5mm bolt, you know, and carburetor is held on with 4mm bolts. You need to put these sleeves in there, make up the difference. A lot of people forget those sleeves. Very common. Had to take the air scoop out to clearance the airbox floor. The other thing is everybody changes the ignition module to a, you know, one that's not rev limited, and it's really not necessary. I'm not changing on this one. I'm going to use the stock original one. I don't see a good reason to do it. Other than it's easier to tune the saw. That'd be about the only reason. Otherwise, it doesn't really make a whole lot of difference. So I don't care. I'll mark how much timing I want to put in the saw. I'm going to say, well, you got to move that about 1/4 inch. Got a small flywheel, a large flywheel. Small flywheel would be less, and a large flywheel would be more. And it'd still be the same degree change. But get that marked, then I can get the degree wheel and stuff out of my way. I don't need to be on there anymore. Get rid of some of these little parts and pieces. Get them out of my way. Like I said, I forgot to order a decomp for it. I went looking for one. I don't have one. I also have to change the screws for the carburetor. I did have those. I like the fact that Husky went to these, got rid of their Allen screws and started using Torx screws. That I like. Other than this one. This one kind of sucks to get in. Most torque wrenches don't fit through this. Through this mount. So this one sucks. My T-handle don't fit through there. This one kind of does. They could have left that screw as a Allen for all I'm concerned. Would have been easier for me. It doesn't fit in there nice, but it works. All right, not that much together. Muffler goes on there. I make two different kinds of deflectors, two different size deflectors. The bolt pattern's the same, the size of it's the same. Well, one's taller than the other. Tall one flows better, but we don't always have room for it. Decide where we want to put it. Kind of like putting them over here, but it's not an easy spot to put it. The other choice is up here on top, and then this one deflects off from it and pushes hot air up here. You really can't put one on this side, so you gotta keep it to the upper part over on this side. It'll clear all the everything it needs to clear. Well, we have this big dimple in there we got to deal with. I got to cut the back of this off because we have this ridge in the muffler. Slide it back a little further. We got to wrap this part of it around the top. Makes it a little more difficult to put together, but that's what it is, and I can use a tall one instead of a short one. Probably be what I'll do. I'm not changing the top covers on this. I don't really see a real good reason to. The XT top cover is a little taller for the cylinder being taller. The brake flag's a little taller. All that kind of stuff, but I don't really see a real reason to do it other than the hole on top. You know, the only difference is we got this decomp hole up here and it's a little taller, right? And I know that this little peg won't quite fit in that little rubber piece on the cylinder quite right, but I don't think it's all that necessary. And otherwise, it's the same and fits and works. So what I'll do with this hole is I just kind of decided I'm going to put some heat tape, reflective tape back here, and we'll live with it. It all works out just fine. You know, everything about this part of it is fine. It'll work good enough for what it is, and we really don't need anything to be any better than that. So I done a couple of them this way, and we haven't had too many issues with them. So I think that's what we're going to do there. Sent me a bunch of extra clips. Kind of nice to have some of them once in a while. do send one away once in a while, so around the shop. But that's what I'm gonna do now is switch over, probably do the muffler and the carburetor and ignition timing. It's an integral key, integrated key, meaning it's part of the flywheel. I have a little modified 3/4 file that I use to file that key, and I take it slow. I gotta go to the bench device back and forth, get my timing right, dial that in. Probably won't show that all on here. That's tedious work. But I'm gonna do the ignition timing, flywheel, on the flywheel, muffler and carburetor, and then we'll finish putting this thing together. I won't be able to run it because I don't have a decomp. I could put a decomp plug in it and run it. I might do that just to test it and run it and make sure everything is good. But I want to put a decomp in it for the customer. So, till the next one.